Good morning. So I am live. I'm here in my studio. Now this is going to be the longest of the sessions that I'm going to do today. So this is actually part of a series really that I've been doing over, I don't know, several months, looking at different mixing desks. Sorry, just trying to tidy up some bits a little bit. So looking at different mixing desks. So I did a training session on the Behringer X32. So I'm going to do one on the SQ. I've also got planned to do one on the QU, Allen Heath QU desk. And I'm going to do one on the Yamaha TF mixer as well. And I'm going to do a fairly in-depth dive into how to use these desks and how to kind of get the most out of them. So we're going to look today at the SQ5. As I say, this is the console that I'm using today. It's the one that lives in my little studio space here, and I use it quite a lot. I love this console. I think it's, as I've said already, I think it's one of the best bang for your buck mixers that you can get on the market right now. It works really, really well. It's a fantastic mixer, this one. So I'm going to try and cover as much as I can about the SQ5. This is going to be about an hour, this session. We're going to go through quite in depth how to use the SQ5. So let's go and take a look at the mixer. If I cut to this camera here, I can hopefully give you a little bit of an overview as to what this mixer is and how it all works. So let's go through all of the bits of this desk here. So as you will see, hopefully you can see if I maybe just move this around a little bit. Starting at the top of the mixer, up in this top corner here, we've got our preamp control. So our preamp control is going to be controlled. This is a touch screen on here, and any of the sections here that we touch on, it's going to pull up the information relevant to the thing that we're talking about. So this is the preamp section of the screen over here. So if I touch on that and then use this control here, I don't know how well this is going to be visible. Let's see if I can get in any tighter on this for you. Show you a little bit more of this. Let's see if I can. There we go, is that a bit better? So, preamp section, we're looking at preamp information here, and as I grab this control here, you can see this number changing. Now, another way that we can do this actually is to look on the computer here. If I pull this one up, so if I were to show you the the V7, I'm going to pull this channel up because that's what this is all about. And if we look at the preamp here, you'll see this gain number. At the minute we've got 37 dB. As I adjust now, if I change that, you'll see it change. So we've got grabbing the gain control. So here you can see me adjusting the gain control up and down, and in the software you can see that number changing as I do that movement here as well. So let's carry on down through the mixer here. So we've got preamp control, then coming down from there is the high pass filter. We'll look more at high pass filters in a minute, but you've got an on and off button here and the ability to be able to adjust the high pass filter here. Coming down from there, we've got gate control, again, turning the gate on and off, and then a gate threshold control here. Compressor, same thing, threshold control with an in and out here. And below that is a panning left and right. Then to the left of that, here we have a number of soft buttons. So these are just pre-programmable buttons. We can set these to be whatever we want them to be. And there's some controls in the setting for choosing what they can be. So they could be something like scene recalls. If you want to come in on a Sunday morning and just go, okay, load our default scene, Sunday morning, boom, there it is. And then any settings that have been adjusted will just be default back to the normal scene settings for that particular scene. You could do that there. You could use these to pull up a page. So if you want a quick way to be able to get to edit some effect, for example, you've got a reverb effect that you use, and you want to be able to quickly pull that up and adjust it, you could set those to recall that particular page. These can be programmed to be pretty much whatever you want them to be. So soft control buttons over here. You've actually also got a couple of soft control buttons over here. Soft control number 8 on this console is default to a tap tempo delay. So this is tap delay, and whatever speed you tap to, it's going to set the delay to that speed. So you tap fast and you get a fast delay, tap slowly and you get slow speed on your delay. So that's what that one's doing over there. Then underneath the screen we've got a bunch of kind of mode. We can change the information here on the screen. So at the minute we're in the processing tab. Processing is probably the main place you're going to go as you're adjusting and controlling sound. This is where you'll see things like EQ and compression and gain settings and stuff. But we've got other options along here, so we can go through routing. So we can see an overview of our routing and see where we're sending things. So we can see on here DCAs, mute groups, main sends, mix sends and effects, so we can see where we're sending stuff. Meters allows us to see the levels of sound that we've got coming in on various different channels. Effects does what it says on the tin. That's where we're going to go to adjust our effects. Scenes, we can recall scenes, so you can program in here different scenes for different things. So you could have a Sunday morning scene, a midweek meeting scene, a youth scene, whatever you want to have in there, and pre-program all those up and just reload them as you need them. Setup is kind of mixer configuration and how we might want to configure the mixing desk. Utilities is where we're going to go. I spoke earlier on about setting up your USB and having USB audio. You've got here SQ drive, which is Allen Heath's USB control on here. So this is where you can do recording and playback and stuff via USB in here, as well as some other bits and bobs. And then I/O is inputs and outputs and our routing matrix, so we can see where we're going to send our audio to and from, all from in here. Coming down from that, we have underneath here our little LED strip. So this has got all the labels on, so I can see what the label of each of these channels is. You can change the colours of these, so we can see them in different colours for different things if you wanted to. Instruments in blue, vocals in green, playback from Pro Presenter or whatever in white. You label them as you want them, however you want them to be. Coming down from each channel, you've got a mute, channel mute. We have a select button, which we'll look more at in a little while. And we have a PAFL, P-A-F-L, so we can listen to that in the headphones. And then coming down from there, you've then got your fader, so we can adjust fader levels up and down as we need to. Now, across the far left-hand side of the mixer, you've got up here a button that says View, and this allows you to change the view of what information is displayed in your little LED strip, so we can see not only the name of it, but also which input it is assigned to as well. And because these don't necessarily have to be input 1, input 2, input 3, input 4, input 5. You can reorder these and put them wherever you want them to be. So you can just see there quite quickly and easily which inputs are going where. Then down here we've got buttons to be able to make feeds pre or post fade. So you can hold that down and you can choose which of these are going to be pre and which are going to be post when you're sending them out of an aux out. You can use this button here to assign something to a group or a mute group or something like that. You can select a mute group and then assign things to that. You've got the ability to be able to send channels to mixes from here, so you can push and hold that, and that then shows you what's assigned to a certain mix. Coming down again from here, we have copy, paste and reset buttons, so you can copy settings from one channel and paste them to another. Really handy feature for certain things, so you can copy an EQ from one channel and paste it onto another channel, or compression settings or anything like that. All of that is entirely possible. And then finally, coming down the left hand side, we have here a bunch of layers. So this particular console has layers A to F, all of which are entirely configurable, and we'll have a look at that later on, but you can choose what you want to go on to which channel. So for example, I might quite often have one layer for drums maybe, so you can have all your drum mics on one layer, another layer for instruments, another layer for vocals, another layer for radio mics, for example. Any of these can be on any of these layers. You can have a layer just for your DCAs. However you want to layer them out, they're all entirely configurable. So multiple layers there that you can choose to do for different things. And then we come to the right hand side of the console, and coming down the right hand side, we have here a level meter. As you can see, that's jumping around as I talk. That's the level of the sound. So at the minute we're selecting the output. So I am, don't know whether you're going to be able to see this. Let's see if I can adjust that focus. Aux 8 is the one that's selected down here, and aux 8 is the feed that I'm sending to my live stream. And as you can see, I've got here the PAFL selected on the master. This is just a copy of that actually at the minute. So the PAFL selected on the master, so that means I'm listening to exactly what I'm sending to the live stream, so I can make sure I'm just monitoring exactly what's going out to the live stream. So this level up here is telling me exactly what is currently going out to our live stream. So live stream audio being shown here on the LED monitors. Below that is our talkback button. So I said earlier on that there's a dedicated talk input on the back of here, so I can plug in a talkback, so I can talk back to stage, and then it's just a push to talk button. So when that's held, you can talk, and as soon as you let go, that's coming off. Now you can see as well actually here, when I push the talk button, that one's lighting up as well, which would mean that this soft key is also assigned as a talkback button as well. So you can push that and assign that as a talkback button, either way, whichever's easiest for you. This section is our EQ. So we've got a 4-band EQ per channel with 3 controls, so full parametric width, frequency and gain. We can adjust all of that as needed per channel. Right in the top hand corner, I don't know if you can see this up there, there is a 3.5mm jack input up here. Coming down from that, I've got a USB socket. I don't think you can see that. Let me just unplug that one for a second. So USB, 3.5mm jack, USB. That is my headphones. So I'm just plugging that back in so I can actually listen. I now seem to have lost, oh there we go, back on both sides. Okay, so headphones jack there with a volume for that, so that's how I'm monitoring the live stream right now. Underneath this are our 4 effects buses, so I can send effects. We've actually got 8 effects units in the rack, but I've got 4 buses here. Again, I can talk more about how that all works later on. So I can pull up any of my 4 effects and see what I'm sending to different effects as I need them. You have here graphic EQ fader flip, so we can, if you're adjusting a graphic EQ, you can make it so that all the faders act as your graphic EQ positions. So you've got your lower frequencies down here, higher frequencies up here, and you can use your faders to adjust the frequencies of the graphic EQ if you need to do that. So you've got a graphic EQ fader flip up there. And then coming down from that, as I've said, we've got a couple more soft buttons, so programmable to whatever you want them to be. Coming down again, we've now got our mix select buttons here. Let me just pull out a little bit so you can see this. So coming down, the mixer down here. Main left and right, your main mix select here. So if I hit that one, that's now whatever's going to the speakers. I'm not using speakers today, but if I were, that would be my speaker mix. And then coming down here, we've got mix 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, which by default those are going to be auxes. And if I just pull back a little bit, so 1 to 8 are auxes, and then 9 to 12 would be groups. You can see they're slightly different colours. So this is a light blue, medium blue, and then darker blue section. So they are slightly different in the way that they appear. That is all customizable again. So you could make it that they are all auxes or they are all groups, or you can change that split however you want it to be. So you could have 4 auxes and 8 groups, or however you want it to split. You can have complete control over that. But you have 12 buses, 12 mix buses that you can choose from to choose where you want to send your audio out. So auxes and groups, controllable all from that there. So I think that's all the controls on the front of the console itself. I think I've covered everything there. I don't think I've missed anything out for the actual main controls. So I don't know which is going to be the best shot for this particular video. We're going to be all over the place, I think, in terms of cameras on all of this. Let's start looking at how we deal with sound as it goes through the mixing desk here. So I'm going to untangle all my wires, and I'm going to switch over to this mic, so hopefully you can still hear that. It might be a little bit quiet here. Let me just pull that gain level back up again. I think I tweaked that gain earlier on. So right, I have some gain now on this microphone. So I am going to be using this. Let me push the right button. Yeah, so I'm going to be using this microphone. As I say, it's an SEV7. Really just because I want to have something that I can make adjustments to, and hopefully you can hear this as we go through. So I'm going to start talking on this microphone and take you through how to set gain, EQ, compressor, gates, any of that kind of stuff. We can go through and adjust it all on this desk, and you'll see how all of that processing works. So as I said earlier on, the first thing we're going to need to do as we're making changes on the console is we're going to want to be on the processing tab. So all your buttons along the bottom of the screen here, make sure you've selected the processing tab. This is the bit where I need to become an octopus and have about 12 hands to make all these adjustments. Now I'm going to flick between the computer view, this one here, and the camera view, because you'll probably see some of the detail better on the computer than you will on the camera, but I'll try and keep on top of that and show you the best view that I can. Okay, right, so as I say, computer view here, we've got the same kind of thing. So we've got the processing, what would be the processing button on the actual console itself. Here we've got a processing tab, and I think all the buttons are the same. So processing, routing, meters. Right, so the one thing that you have on the actual console itself, processing, routers, meters, and then we have an effects button here. On the computer view, the effects bit is missing. Scenes, setup, utility, and I/O. So all the rest of that is the same. It's just the effects that you change slightly differently on the computer to how you do it on the actual console. But as I say, most of the time you're going to be in processing anyway, and we're going to be looking at the processing tab here, and I'm going to take you through how we make the adjustments. So if we cut back to this one for a second, the first thing you're going to want to do when you bring audio into your console is set your gain level. And as I say, the actual physical control for that is here, right in the top left-hand corner of the console itself. So you need to make sure that you've got the right channel selected, and as I say, it doesn't follow the software. So just because you've got it selected in the software doesn't mean it's selected on the console as well. You need to select it independently in both places. So I am looking at the V7 channel, which is the V7 microphone that I'm using. So I can change this gain, and if I take it down, I need to be careful because otherwise I'm going to disappear completely. But if I take this level down, you'll hear I get quieter, and as I push this back up again, I get louder in the stream. But this is our input gain level. And what we're going to do here is we're going to try and set this to aim for the 0 point. And if we look on the computer view, you'll see this over here. So on the computer, I have here a level indicator. Hopefully you can see this on the left hand side, and you can see where my level is. And if I talk loudly, hey, 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 it will go up above 0, and if I talk quietly, it will go down. And on this particular desk, 0 is our goal. We're aiming for 0 dB, and when you talk loud, it will go over 0, and when you talk quietly, it will go under 0. And you want to be fluctuating around about the 0 mark. So something like this right now is not a bad position for our gain to be in. Now you'll see on the screen here that we have 48 volts phantom power. That's something that you would use for things like condenser mics or a DI box. Maybe you might need the phantom power. This microphone's a dynamic microphone. It doesn't need phantom power. As you can see, it's working perfectly well without it. If you're not sure about phantom power, the best thing to say is if it's not working and you think it should be, try turning phantom power on and see if that makes it work. Phantom power is just a power supply, and some devices need power supplies and some devices don't. Do be a little bit careful, because there are some things that can be damaged if you give them phantom power when they don't need it. But generally speaking, most things, so if I did turn phantom power on, we lose it for a second, and then once it's clicked in, it comes back on again. You can hear the microphone still working. It's absolutely fine. There's no problems sending phantom to something that doesn't need it. But if you don't need it, you're safer to turn it off. There we go. So you might have just heard that. Take it for a second, audio goes completely, and then it comes back in again, and then it's all fine. So yeah, if you need phantom power, turn it on, and if you don't, turn it off. But try not to send phantom where it isn't needed unless you absolutely have to. And if something isn't working, try the phantom power and see if it needs power to make it work. Sometimes it might just come to life when it's got some power supplied to it. So next to that is the pad. You'll see here we've got the pad button. Pad will reduce the level. I can do this, but I'll go quiet, so I'll do this just briefly. So I'll enable the pad there, and you can see my level has dropped significantly. I'll turn that off again so you can hear me. All pad is going to do is just drop the level that you've got coming in on that particular device. Pad can be really useful for sometimes like a guitar or a keyboard if you've got a very loud instrument, and sometimes DI boxes like this one doesn't have any kind of buttons or anything on it. It's just got an input and an output and nothing in the middle. If you've got a very loud instrument that's coming in and you need to be able to control that sound, and you've got your gain control turned all the way down to 0 and it's still really loud coming in, that's when your pad can be useful, and you could take your pad down and just give yourself a bit of headroom, bit of space to be able to adjust things on the mixing desk. So if something's very loud, try using the pad to take it down a little bit. Let's cut back to this view. So you've got a gain control. You've got a trim control as well on this console, and again, depending on what you're doing, sometimes trim is useful, sometimes it isn't. I would generally say, unless you know what you're doing, don't use the trim, just stick with the gain. Gain is going to be your main thing that you're going to want to use. Don't worry too much about the trim. It's one of those things that if you know what it is and you know what it's doing, then you can use it. In one sense, it's kind of doing the same thing as the gain. If I turn that down, the level will get quieter, and if I turn it back up again, the level gets louder again. So you might think it's kind of like another gain control, and in one sense it kind of is, but if you don't know what it's doing, just don't worry about it, leave it. You just need to use the gain control is the main thing to use here. And then polarity, I can hit that on this and you probably won't hear a great deal of difference. Polarity is just going to flip the phase. In fact, this sounds very weird in my headphones. It's going to flip the phase of the thing that you're hearing. So if I put it in, so that's normal polarity, normal kind of phase of this microphone. Because I'm only using one microphone, you won't really hear any difference on this. But if you have multiple microphones, so on a drum kit, you will use polarity, particularly if you mic the top and bottom of a snare drum, you will probably want to flip the polarity on one of those two microphones, because otherwise those two microphones will just be out of phase with each other. Again, it's a slightly complicated thing. If you know what you're doing with it, great. If you don't worry too much about it. The time to use it is if you've got something with lots of microphones on it and one of the microphones is sounding a bit weird. It probably means that microphone is out of phase and you need to flip the phase on it. So if you've mic'd up a drum kit and your snare drum's sounding a bit strange, just try flipping the polarity on it and seeing if that fixes the problem. Again, it's one of those things that you might know what you're doing with it, in which case, great, it's there and it's there to be used and it's a very helpful thing. And if you don't know what you're doing with it, then you're probably best just leaving it alone. Then coming across, we've got delay, so you can time align things. You can add delay onto a particular microphone. Again, could be useful on a drum kit if you need to time align certain drums, if your drums are out of phase with each other. Rather than just completely flipping polarity, you might instead want to just adjust the phase slightly by adding some delay to some of the microphones. Again, helpful tool. If you know what you're doing with it, great. And if you don't, probably don't worry too much about it. There's not many instances where it's a useful thing, as I say, except for something like a drum kit where you've got loads of mics around a drum kit. You might use it there. Otherwise, don't worry too much about it. So all of that stuff comes under the preamp section. So as we look on the first tab and on the camera, that's where we just tap the first section. So we can tap through all of these sections down here. The first section, it's all exactly the same information on here as it is on the computer screen. It's just often easier to see it on the computer screen. And that's our first tab section on there. Now coming down from that here, you will see that we've got a section just for the high pass filter. Now this is, on the computer, you have that view. On the camera, making sure I cut the right thing again, we don't have a space here for high pass. So if you're just on the console, I tend to use the EQ section to look at the adjustments for the high pass. Now, I don't know how well you can see this on the camera, but you can see there the image that we're getting on that camera screen is now very similar to the image that we're getting on the computer screen. And what we see here is a graphical representation of the audio frequencies. And we can see so with the first number that we've got down here is 20 hertz, and it's going right the way along to 20 kilohertz. And we have the ability to be able to adjust frequencies anywhere in the middle of that. Now, if I turn on the high pass, there we go. So turn on the high pass, and I can now adjust this, and you'll hear what this is doing. So a high pass filter does what it says on the tin. It allows high frequencies to pass through whilst it starts to reduce the lower frequency. So if I sweep this up, you'll see this happening. So as I add this high pass filter up here, the low frequencies will start going out of my voice, and my voice starts sounding thinner and thinner and thinner until so there's a limit as to how far I can go. I've hit that top limit now, and that is at 2 kilohertz. So I've reduced everything below 2 kilohertz in my voice now. That is only high frequencies, and as I add that back in again, I'll sweep that back down, you'll hear the bass start coming back into my voice again. Okay, and that's a high pass filter, and you can adjust that as you see fit. Now, I would normally, on a vocal mic, I would be looking at that to be sat somewhere around certainly 100, 120 hertz at the lowest end, and I would quite happily take that up to 150, 160, 180, maybe up to 200, depends on the voice, but somewhere in that kind of region is where I would normally sit a high pass filter for a vocal mic. But again, just use that to taste. If there's something that you're doing that's got a lot of low end in it, so for example a kick drum, you're unlikely to want to cut out lots of low end out of your kick drum. You will want to keep the low end in there. So if you've got a kick drum mic, I would still potentially put a high pass filter on it, but I would be using that at a very low frequency. So I might be using it at like 40 hertz or something, just to kind of clean up the low end a little bit in that kick drum mic. I would personally put a high pass filter on pretty much everything. There's not a lot that I wouldn't high pass filter. Possibly a bass guitar, possibly a synth. If you've got a bass synth, you might leave those open, but it's not unreasonable to put a high pass on there. Quite often, your PA system will only be able to produce down to a certain frequency. So your PA system might only be able to produce down to 40 hertz, 45 hertz, something like that. Have a look at the specification of your subwoofers that you're using and see what they can go down to. But it's not uncommon to have a sub that will only go down to 45 hertz, in which case you can very feasibly say there's no point in me allowing the system to produce frequencies down as low as 20 hertz. So this, as I said before, this here starts off at 20 hertz down at the bottom. Most subwoofers are not going to go that low, so even bass guitars and kick drums and stuff, you're not going to be producing 20 hertz out of your PA system. So you might very feasibly say we want to start reducing that down to 40 hertz or something. And remember as well, this curve, if this point, so this is the point that we're measuring the frequency at. So this is at the minute we've got a high pass set to 200 hertz. Okay, so what that's actually saying is, it's by 200 hertz here, we've maybe taken about 3 dB off that frequency point. Okay, by maybe 170 hertz, we've taken that down by about 6 dB. By 100 hertz, we've taken it down by 12 dB. So even at 100 hertz, with our frequency set to 200, even at 100 hertz, we've still only taken 12 dB off. Now that's a fairly significant amount, but it's not saying that there are no frequencies below 100 hertz. There is still audio that goes below 100 hertz in my voice right now. Yep, so we can go, I mean, even down to 50 hertz. 50 hertz, we're getting to a point where we're less than 20 dB. We've taken more than 20 dB off that sound. So by 50 hertz, we've taken a really big cut off that. But that is a high pass filter set to 200, yet we're still seeing frequencies down to 50 coming through that. So if on a bass guitar, I were to set a high pass at 40 hertz, I would still be allowing frequencies down to 20 hertz or 10 hertz through the system. They'll just be reduced slightly. So they'll still be there. They'll just be at a slightly lower level. So it's entirely feasible to say you can put a high pass filter on a kick drum or a bass guitar or a bass synth or anything like that if you wanted to. So that's high passes. Let's carry on. So we move from our high pass to, well, the next control that we have on the console is the gate. Now that is the next section down on our mixing desk here. So I hit this little bit here, and that has pulled up the information about a gate. Now again, if I switch to this view so you can see this on here, once again you'll see that it hasn't pulled up the same information down here as well, so we can open that up on the tab here. And we're now looking at a gate, and a gate is a sound activated switch. So what we're saying with a gate is at what point are we going to say that the sound can go through? So we're going to say that by default no sound is allowed to get through our system. Sound is going to be completely cut off. And at what point are we going to allow that sound to pass back through again? So let me cut through to this view again and I'll show you how this works. Right, that seems to have actually reset itself. Let's turn that back on again. There we go, that's now working. So that's now cutting that sound out. Right, let's try that again. So I take that threshold up, you'll start to hear it starts to cut some of my words out. So my words are not all coming through now. Okay, so that's the gate cutting out that audio. Now, we've actually here also got a depth setting here as well, which is actually saying, so at what point it's not actually cutting the sound out entirely. It's reducing it by 20 dB. So when the gate kicks in, the level drops by 20 dB. So we can use a gate not just as a complete switch. So if it was a switch, it would be on and off. So the sound is either there or it's not there. This actually is currently saying when the gate kicks in, the level is going to drop by 20 dB. Now 20 dB is a big drop, so it would be like a significant drop off. It would almost be like the sound is no longer there, but it isn't. It is still there. It's just a lot quieter. So if I talk more quietly, what you should notice is that the sound stays, but it just drops by a significant level. It's very hard to demonstrate that. Anyway, so that's a gate. Now a gate it's not the most useful of tools. I'm going to turn this off again because it's going to get a bit annoying. So a gate is not the most useful of tools. A gate is a bit of a brick wall filter. It will. It's not very subtle. When a gate kicks in, you know it kicks in. Sometimes you might use a gate on drums. Sometimes you might use a gate on a vocal mic if it's a very noisy vocal mic. But to be honest, I don't like using it on a vocal mic because it's very unsubtle. It is like it's the sound's there and then the sound's not there. So it's really prominent, really obvious, really not very nice to listen to. So I don't like using a gate unless I absolutely have to. As I say, you can use it, but I would very much suggest that you take a look at the depth, or sometimes it's called a range, and I would take that down. So you can see what's happening to the graph there as I drop that. So instead of taking 20 dB off when the gate kicks in, I would maybe say let's make it as a 5 dB drop. So when the gate kicks in, so if I turn this back on again now, and let's take that threshold level up a little bit. And now as I talk, when we get to a point where the gate kicks in, what you'll start to notice is instead of my level dropping completely, it just goes quieter. So the level now will jump by only 5 dB. So it makes it a much more subtle thing to use. So if you are going to use a gate, I would strongly suggest also adjusting your depth or your range there to make that a more subtle thing to come in and out to. Yeah, so that's a gate. It's there. You can use it. I use it as a much more of a how to solve a problem, how to get out of an issue, particularly with drums. Can be useful with drums if you've got a badly tuned drum kit or something and you need to fix a problem on a drum kit and you haven't got time to retune the drum kit before the service starts, then a gate might be a useful tool to use for something like that. Otherwise, I try to avoid it wherever I possibly can. So that's gates. The next section is going to be our... Alright, so we change again from the physical buttons on the actual mixer to what we see on the software. So coming down here, and we do have an insert section. Yeah, so they are following the same actually as what's on the software. So there is an insert section. It's just greyed out on the screen because I'm not using it for anything at the minute. We'll come back to inserts later on because that will make more sense later. For now, let's skip on to the EQ section. EQs are very useful. I was going to say EQs are fairly obvious, but maybe for some people they're not fairly obvious. So an EQ on a digital mixing desk, you're generally going to have what's called a parametric EQ. Parametric EQ is an EQ with a lot of control to it. So if I show you this on the screen again, we have 4 bands here of equalization, and equalization is just a way of adjusting frequencies in a sound. So if I take this frequency here, for example, and I sweep this up and down, you'll hopefully hear that's the high frequencies, all that up there. And as I sweep this down, it gets very honky and horrible in the middle. and I keep going down, and it starts to get very boxy and very weird down here, and I keep sweeping it down, and it gets very bassy down the bottom here. Hopefully you can hear all that changing as I move that around. So EQs is just going to give us a way to adjust the frequencies of the sound on our microphone or whatever it is that we've got plugged into it. But as well as just sweeping, so we can go up and we can go down. We can cut frequencies as well. We can do the same thing with a cut. So we call that a boost. Boost when you go up, cut when you go down. You can sweep, which is taking it up and down. So we can choose a frequency, we can boost it or we can cut it as we see fit. But the other thing that we can also do is we can change the width of it. So we can have it as a very narrow frequency. That's particularly useful for feedback elimination. If you've got a feedback frequency, it's one very specific frequency that you want to eliminate. You can find that one frequency that's feeding back and just isolate that one frequency, take that one frequency out and solve some feedback problems that way. Or you can make a much broader adjustment to the sound. So you can see I can take like all of the high frequencies here now. So I'm just taking a massive scoop out of the high frequencies, and hope you can hear that in my voice. My voice has now just gone very boomy and bassy, and there's no high frequencies left in that at all. If I push that back in again, suddenly my voice gets some high frequencies to it again. So we can make a very broad adjustment or a very fine adjustment on our graphic EQ, on our parametric EQ, sorry. And as I say, we've got 4 bands. Now, once we've started applying our high-pass filter, you'll notice here that I've got a band that's all the way down here. So I've got a band that's currently set to about 60, 70 hertz, my low frequency band, that it doesn't really have much purpose because it's in a frequency band that's already been removed by the high pass frequencies. So this is currently not really doing very much because most of those frequencies are already being dealt with by the high pass. So it sometimes is worth adjusting that frequency up and putting that somewhere into a space that's going to have more of an impact. Now, it might be, and I will quite often actually have an effect, have a frequency that does something like this, because around that sort of 100 to 200 hertz point can be the bit where you get the popping P's. Hopefully you can hear that there. Popping P's. So it's in that sort of space where that tends to happen. So I will often have a cut here, maybe something like that. So I've got the high pass filter cutting off from 200, but then I've also got an additional filter here at 150, 160, something like that, that's dealing with the popping P's section. So you could have an EQ that looks a little bit like that, where there is a section of this that is crossing over between those 2 bands, and that's entirely possible and entirely reasonable, and I will often have that kind of thing in place. Now, the one thing I would suggest is that you try not to cross these bands over. So you will find, particularly if you can't grab that other one, come here, that one. If you look on the actual mixing desk itself, these have all got labels to them, and let's just switch over to this one. So down this side of the mixer, it says HF, HM, LM and LF, and that stands for high frequency, high mid, and low frequency. And each of those labels corresponds to one of the points on the graph. So if I cut back to this one, that purple one there is the LF, low frequency band. But then we've got a low mid, a high mid, and a high band. And again, it is entirely possible that I could take my high band and I could drag it all the way down here, and I can use my high band to start making adjustments to my sound in and around a low-mid area. And that's possible, it works, but it can start getting very, very confusing. So one of the things that I would say is try to make sure that that band stays in the right order. So your low-mid is the one that you use to deal with the low frequencies, low-mid frequencies. The high-mid is the one that you're dealing with the high-mid frequencies with. And your high band is the one that's dealing with the high frequencies with. And if you start crossing them over, you can very quickly get confused. Right, I've just taken a look at the time and I've realised we are munching through time very, very quickly now. So I'm going to speed this up a little bit and try and get through a bit more of this mixing desk because we've barely scratched the surface on this thing yet. So that's EQs. We can use them very powerfully to make significant adjustments to sound. You are definitely going to be wanting to make changes to your EQ. That's a real definite. The next one that we've got on here is our compressor, and compressors are again a very, very powerful tool, really, really useful, maybe a little bit more of an optional thing for some people. You might necessarily not want to use these all the time, but if you can get into using a compressor, it's really worth doing. So I'm going to turn the compressor on, and I'm going to do you the brief version of how to adjust a compressor. So a compressor is again a sound activated device, much like our gate was, and we have a threshold here. Anything that's got a threshold indicates that it's going to be sound activated in some ways. So as I take this threshold down, you will start to see a different bar appearing on the sound, on the meters there, sorry, the red bar. And this is showing you a gain reduction. Sometimes it'll be labelled as GR, which stands for gain reduction. It's saying how much are we going to chop out of this sound once we've hit this threshold point. So we can see here on the input side, my level is fluctuating currently between about negative 20, maybe 20, 18, something like that, up to about 0. So anything from about negative 18 up to 0 is where the level's at. Now the threshold is currently set to negative 25. So the threshold is currently set just below this point here. So it means that any sound going above this level here is going to be affected by the compressor. So anything that's going over 25 dB right now, anything that is going over 25 dB is going to be hitting this compressor and is going to start to reduce our level. And a compressor does what it says on the tin. It is compressing that sound. So when the sound hits a certain volume level, anything above that level is going to be squashed back down again. So it's going to be controlling the higher parts of our sound. So a compressor is a really useful tool, particularly if you've got somebody like a preacher or somebody who really gets excited and suddenly jumps up. That compressor can just help to squeeze those high levels of sound back down again. So yeah, compressor, controlling high levels of sound. We also have the ability to add makeup gain here on our compressor. Let me switch back to this view. Gain here. So as you start to squeeze that sound at the top, you can then boost that back up. So we can see here, so this is 10 dB, we're chopping 10 dB off. If we get as far as this on the compressor, we're not as far as that. So we're maybe taking 4 to 6 dB off this. If I really go for it, then it does start to jump up there, you can see. But as I'm talking normally, we're maybe taking 6 to 8 dB, somewhere in this kind of range off that. So you could add that back in with your gain if you wanted to keep your level consistent in and out of your compressor there. Again, we can spend ages on compressors. In fact, I have done a whole video on compressors. So if you want to see more about compressors, go and check out my compressor video, because it'll probably be far better than what I can go into now. Right, I've got 7.5 minutes to finish talking about this mixer. So I'm going to crack on through. Right, maybe this one is a little bit more obvious, but then coming down from our compressors, we're then down to pan. Pan is going to take something from the left to the right, and depending on what device you're listening to right now, you may have heard that or you may not have done. You might know whether or not you're listening to something on a stereo device or not, but if you heard that, you were listening in stereo, and if you didn't, you were listening in mono. Okay, so that's all of that stuff up at the top there. Now I want to talk through how we go about getting sound out. Once we've started processing it, the next thing we're going to want to do is to be able to send it somewhere. So this was what I was saying earlier on in the kind of basics of sound systems. A mixing desk is all about bringing in inputs and then sending them out somewhere. So fairly obviously, the faders down the bottom here, if you fade something up, it will get louder, and if you turn it down again, it will get quieter. So again, I can demonstrate that as I pull this fader down, you'll hear my audio getting quieter, and as I push it back up again, you'll hear it getting louder. And that's going to be true of everything, all of our mixes. But to change sound in different mixes, you're going to use the buttons down the right-hand side, down here. The main left and right here. As you push something up, that's what's going to go to your speakers, probably. If you've set this up correctly, that will go to your speakers. But if you want to send audio anywhere else, you're going to select one of these mixes down the side. Now, as I've already said, aux 8 is the aux bus that I'm using right now to send to my live stream. So any changes I make to aux 8 are the ones that you are going to hear. So I can make this change. Here I've got stereo 1, and you can see that there's a little light flashing there which shows that it's got some audio playing, which means that Pro Presenter is still playing a bit of music. So there it is. So there's a little bit of background music there, and you can hear as I fade that up, it gets louder, and as I pull it down again, it gets quieter again. So very, very simple, but we can do that independently for every single mix bus. So we can push something to aux 1, there's nothing plugged into aux 1 right now, and then again aux 2, aux 3, aux 4. All of these are fully independent of each other. So as I flick through all of those mixes, all of those changes I was listening to in my headphones, but I don't think you heard any of that, so it was all a bit weird for me, but for you that wouldn't have made any difference. Yeah, so all of those changes are fully independent for each individual mix, and you can send anything you want to any of those mixes, and depending on what you've got plugged into it, you will hear those changes. So normally that's going to be band. You're going to have mix 1 for drums, mix 2 for bass, mix 3 for keys, mix 4 for guitar, however you want to set them out. They're all going to just be connected into those outputs. And then whichever of those mixes you select, you're going to be altering the sound for that particular mix to that particular person. Right, I'm just looking at what I wanted to cover in this session and how much time we've got left. I think the next thing that's going to be quite useful to talk about is going to be I'm going to talk about effects. So I mentioned earlier on that this mixer has 8 effects buses on it, or 8 effects processors on it, but you've only got 4 effects buses. So over here, I've got 1 to 4 labelled up as effects, and much like the mixes that we just talked about, if I select a mix and change the faders, you send more of that thing to that mix. Exactly the same thing is true here. So if I select effects 1, I can now send something to effects 1. So let's send my voice to effects 1, and then again, the higher you push it, the more effect you get. The lower you pull it, the less that effect will be. Now, there are 8 effects units in this mixer, but only 4 effects buses. So that means that you can only send 4 of your effects into like a kind of group. So if you wanted to send all of your vocals to a reverb, for example, we could make effects 1 a reverb, and then I select effects 1, push all of my vocal mics into that reverb, and then all of my vocal mics would have that reverb on them. But if I wanted to use the other 4 effects that are available, I spoke earlier on about inserts, and we have inserts that we can get to that are in here. And again, if I switch over to the computer view, you might be able to see this a bit better. So if I go to the insert section here, we can insert an effect that's just onto a particular channel. Now if I go into my effects rack, so back over on the console, I can go to effects number 5, which isn't currently assigned, and if I assign that to a reverb, recall, so I've put a reverb into there, you have the ability to switch around to the back panel, and I can now insert this into number 3, and now you can hear some reverb. Now I can turn that down a bit because that is quite a lot of reverb, but that reverb is now only on this one channel, so I can just insert that reverb just onto that one specific channel. Now, this has some implications in terms of how you would use this. In fact, let me just turn that right down because that's going to get a bit annoying. So this could be really useful for things like if you wanted to put a reverb on your snare drum. You could insert a reverb directly onto your snare drum channel and just apply reverb just to your snare drum, and you can have a dedicated snare drum reverb that's just doing reverb snare. Or something like that. So if there is a channel that you want a specific reverb on that one specific channel, you can use that method to drop a reverb directly into a channel and give you audio, reverb, delay, chorus, whatever it might be, onto that one channel. I feel like I've spoken about this mixing desk for a long time. There's still loads more that I could cover, and if you want to know more about this mixing desk, please let me know, and I might be able to do another whole video about it. I don't know if anybody's in the chat's got any questions that you want me to try and cover on this mixing desk, because otherwise I'm going to wrap it up here, because we've done a lot there in that time. So yeah, that is the Allen Heath SQ5. It actually is worth saying the SQ series of mixing desks. There are 3 of them. There's the SQ5, the SQ6 and the SQ7. They're all exactly the same brain, exactly the same processor, exactly the same software, but the only differences between them is the number of faders. So the SQ5 is the smallest one. As I've said, it's the one that fits into a 19-inch rack, so it's nice and compact and small. If you go up to the SQ6, you get another 8 faders, I think, on it. And a few extra buttons and things as well, but it's then a physically bigger thing. And again, you can go up to the SQ7, which again just gets bigger and has more buttons and faders and stuff on it as well. But in terms of the number of channels, they're all the same. They're all 48 channel mixers. I think they're all 48 in, 24 out. All the same effects, all the same everything, all the controls, all the buttons, all the look of it was all exactly the same. It's just slightly bigger each time. So any of the SQ consoles that you might have will all function in that same way that I've just gone through with that one. I'm going to cut back to this microphone. Yep, that's right. Checking I've gone to the right channel. I'm getting all my wires twisted as well here. So that is the Allen Heath SQ5 console. As I say, if anybody's got any questions on that, then feel free to chuck them into the chat, and I'll do my best to answer those for you.